part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Welcome to Dig on America, where we speak truth to power. Every week, we give you the dig on how American history, policies, and media created the social and political issues we face today. DoA is independent media supported by listeners, but they'll tell you we're just fake news, deep state propaganda, funded by George Soros, the Clinton Foundation, BLM Marxists, and
Captain Kangaroo.
I keep wanting to say Darkwing Duck, but I think it must be something in the music that's triggering it for me.
When there's trouble, you call DW.
Darkwing Duck.
Hello, my name is Lunchpad McQuack.
They had the same, man. I feel so bad watching those cartoons. Oh, fine, we'll do Launchpad McQuack. That'll be my person.
Launchpad McQuack and Captain Kangaroo. We are heavily funded.
I feel so bad for like the voice actors of that time because it was like 4 people doing 80% of all the shows. I'm like, dude, did they get days off?
You would watch like Scooby-Doo and then Batman and then the MC Hammer cartoon. You'd be like, wait a minute, Shaggy is Robin, is MC Hammer's best friend. Okay.
This man had a busy work week last week. He was on 18 shows.
And now he's playing a 2-year-old on Denver the Last Dinosaur because they wouldn't even try to change their voice.
Yeah, he tried to get on Bluey, but Bluey is hot right now.
Bluey is, look, okay, let me tell you something real quick on Bluey. Bluey, I give huge props to Bluey because while I'm not the most wholesome person, I do want my 7 and 5-year-old to be somewhat wholesome. Bluey's fucking awesome. Like, it's just like a show about parents playing with their kids, and that's it. And it's like, except they're dogs. And well, I mean, men are dogs, right? Amber?
They are absolute dogs, yeah.
Yes. So
dogs are better than people. So come on.
Yeah.
No, that's actually true. Dogs are better than people.
Well,
so men are not better than people. So no. Don't besmirch the dogs.
Dogs were better than people to me until my dogs got sick the other day. And mind you, we'll introduce our guests in one sec. I have artificial turf in my backyard. And if you would have asked me a year ago, what's the best purchase you've ever made? I would have told you it's my artificial turf because that shit is awesome. Then the other day, my dogs decided that they were going to get sick and they both got diarrhea. I am literally farming flies in my backyard.
Well, that's good.
In the front yard, there are 0 flies. In the backyard, there are thousands of them. I bought a bag from Home Depot, that fly catcher. It was full in an hour. And I'm like, now I hate dogs. And I think
the dog's fault.
Is that the dog's fault? Yeah.
You couldn't go in the toilet.
That they should go on the toilet. Anyway, this is Jason Dutch. That right there, that guy is Mikey Famine. We are joined by the amazing Amber Rose Washington. Again, our awesome friend. And Big Haas will be joining us, we think, at some point in time. We have a cool show for you today. In the first hour, we're going to talk about incongruency / trans, however you want those, there are different people who call it different things. A lot of shit going on in Florida with that. We're going to really give Amber the reins to just talk for the first hour of the show. Turns out, and Amber will love this one. You have a new friend. I'm saying this in a joking way. This is not exactly accurate, so just get mad at me if you want to. But turns out Amber has a new friend in the drag community. Madison Cawthorn likes to wear bras, it turns out. I mean,
really?
He came out and said that alpha males like run the world. And then he's taking pictures a few years ago in women's underwear on a cruise. Mikey, can you find and pull up those photographs?
What's his name?
You know what's interesting about Madison is that, people like him that say so many disparaging things about other people is that he represents people that are actually so deep in the closet with frustration. They don't know how to take it out. And, yeah, I don't care what his issue is. He's kind of garbage to me. But
he had a quote. I'm going to try to find this quote here. I had written this quote. I had taken a screenshot of this quote. I might have done it in a different device, but it's essentially, he had said that he's obviously into evangelical politics, and we're talking about Madison Cawthorn, who is a U.S. representative from North Carolina, by the way.
The guy in the wheelchair.
Yeah, the guy in the wheelchair, right? And you know, I'm not hating on him. If the guy likes to take pictures in women's underwear, that's fine with me. I don't give a fuck, right? I think he's a scumbag for other reasons. That's not the reason why. But yeah, there it is. And Madison had said basically that, you know, homosexuality is disgusting. Men should be alpha males. That he was raised on, if I'm quoting this correctly, proverbs and push-ups, I think is what it was.
Yeah.
Or prayers and push-ups, one of the two. And he just exudes this.
He said that?
Yes. He said that. Can you bring that picture back up again of Mr. Prayers and push-ups?
I already purged my search history. I don't need to be on any more lists. Thank you very much.
But I mean, maybe he was taking pictures in girls' bras, but then he went on Twitter and he was like, oh, so now the left is trying to expose me for taking wacky vacation photos? No, Madison. Just admit what you like to do, and it's fine. I ain't hating on you. Just be yourself.
Well,
Yeah.
I think he was just doing something non-toxic masculinity, which is kind of his brand, and now he has to make up for it. But if people want to cross us, go ahead and do your thing. Fuck this guy. I don't count him in their number. They're actually valid people, and he's just a vacuous piece of suck. So yeah,
Amber,
you don't represent that group at all. He's just a weirdo.
I don't know, Amber. What do you think?
Well, I got a lot that I can think about. So you guys have been, doing so well with your, sketch comedy that, my topics are going to be a little bit heavy. But the reality is this. Let me just break three things down. People often conflate three different things. There's three words I'm going to say, and they're three completely different ideas. The first one is sex. Sex is one's reproductive characteristics, reproductive tracts, right? Their genitalia, their outward facing genitalia.
So you mean like biological sex?
Biological sex,
okay.
According to the gametes, right? The gametes which produce the gonads, and you either have sperm or you have eggs. Then there's something.
Hold on. I've been told that I have awesome gonads.
Okay.
Who said that?
No one.
No one said that.
No one said it.
No one. No one is who.
So they conflate sex with gender. Now, gender is a societal construct.
Right.
And it is the expectation or perception of how a female or a male will act or what they will be interested in. For example, in Victorian times, the girl color was blue and the boy color was pink. But now it's reversed, right? So there's an example of how society changes the concept of gender over time. The third and most important that most everybody completely doesn't understand is gender identity. Gender identity is the innate sense of self that we all have from a very, very young age. In fact, the overwhelming majority of human beings understand their gender identity well before they enter kindergarten. In fact, that age group for the overwhelming number is about 3 years old. So Jason, Mikey, all of you guys knew that you guys knew you were little boys by the time you were 3. You just didn't pay attention to it. And so when you see laws like Ron DeSantis or Greg Abbott talking about how we will never talk about gender identity, it's kind of stupid and it makes no sense because every human being has a gender identity, right?
Right.
And we all know what that is at a very early age. The reality is that nearly 99% of the human population, about 98.4% of the human population, understands that they are congruent, which means you know that you're a boy and you're cool with it. So we have a term for that called cisgender, right? Some people get offended by this. I don't understand why. Cisgender, cis, if you look at the etymology, means on the same side of gender. Obviously, we just made a definition for us. So
well,
people
Amber, why don't
know
you
who they
Amber,
are.
Amber, why don't you spell cisgender, and maybe that would
That'll help. Yeah,
that'll help some of their confusion.
yeah. CIS gender.
So you're not a
CIS.
sissy.
Right.
You're
It's not
cisgender.
sissy. Oh my
Wrong
God.
wrong
No.
word, boys.
So cisgender meaning that you're congruent versus the 1.4% of humanity, like myself, that were born incongruent. Now, along with that gender identity, where the hell does it come from? Well, there's lots of scholarly literature on this, some of which through the National Institutes of Health, which is, by the way, the largest biomedical research institute on the planet. One of their papers that I just been throwing around for scientific evidence for these other folks is that there's several regions of the brain that are affected that create that sense of who you are, and it's located in different regions. We have the cortical region. There's a lining in the cortical region in females that's very thick. In males, we find that it's very thin. In trans females like myself, it's very thick, just like cisgender females, right? There's also two other places that it's found. One is, this is going to be a weird set of words that I say, so bear with me. It's in the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis, right? And in the second part, it's in the anterior hypothalamus. Those two subsections.
That's in
of
the
brain.
Matrix, right?
Is it? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I
That's
don't
the
know.
name of their ship, the hypothalamus.
Yeah, maybe you need another blue pill. Let me see if I can find one. But those regions of the brain they found are responsible for giving you your innate sense of who you are, and that comes from a gender identity. So either there's a myriad of things that can go wrong. We've seen that. We know that sex and gender are anything but binary, right? So we know all that. And Big Haas is here. Hi. And so yeah, that's my thoughts on what you just said. People need to understand those different terms and understand there's a big difference, that this is not arbitrary, right? There's nobody on the planet, myself included, that ever wanted to be born this way. I would never, ever wish this upon my worst enemy, because we miss out on all of the wonderful milestones that every other human being takes for granted. And do I want to be trans? Fuck no. I never wanted to be born this way. But from the early age of 3, I knew I was a little girl, not a little boy. And that was because of the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis and the anterior hypothalamus. That those two things that we've learned in science, because what does science do? Science evolves year after year. Our knowledge base gets bigger and bigger. Every year we learn new things and we change our science. So what was true in science at one point augments. It doesn't flip-flop on itself. Typically, it augments. So as we learn more, our knowledge base grows, and we learn more and more on how the world works, how our bodies work, and whatnot. Before we even map the human genome, we knew that there were genes. We just couldn't prove it. Right? But now that we've mapped it, we understand what everything does. Do we understand the ramifications of it yet? No. But we know more about what made me be born trans. Believe this or not, this is the truth. We know more about what made me to be born trans than we do why a little infant gets leukemia. That's interesting. People should take pause on that, because I'm a woman that when I was 5 years old, I was deaf. And at 6 years old, I had an operation on both of my ears to try to restore my hearing. And they lost me on the operating table. They had to resuscitate me. And then at the age of 25, I was diagnosed with a rare blood cancer, right? And all of the research out there said I had 5 years to live. It was devastating. I was sitting in a room with other stage 4 cancer patients. It was dreadful. And then in my 40s, I had an ischemic stroke caused by 3 holes in my heart. I had a congenital heart defect they never found. So I had 3 holes in my heart, which necessitated 3 heart operations to repair those holes in my heart. And all of those different things, which is just a little tiny piece of my medical history, I would rather go through each one of those things 100 times over than to be born one more time like this. People should take pause and listen to that. That's how serious this is. This is not arbitrary. Some people believe this is a game. I am now post-operative for a couple of years now, which means I've had bottom surgery. I've had all these different things. Not everybody needs that, but I did. I required it. So, you know, my anatomy now matches my inner workings of my physical brain, right? So I hope that answered the question. Did it? I think it did.
I'm not sure what the question was, but I mean, the question I think is Madison Cawthorn, but but like I'll tell you, every time that I hear you speak, I learn something new, and it becomes vital because I am not equipped to have this conversation. So most of what I get from my conversation when I am trying to be an ally to the trans community comes from yourself and like one other person, right? And I don't want to pretend that you and this other person speak for every single trans person, right?
Yeah,
Because there, of course, there's a spectrum. And later in the second hour, we're going to talk about autism because it's Autism Acceptance Month. And there are autistic people whose conversations sound very similar to your own. And interestingly, it's about 1.5% of the population, which is another parallel there. But there are autistic people who will say, I would not want to change myself because then I wouldn't want to be me. I wouldn't be me, right? And why would I want to be someone who I'm not? And there are other autistic folks who will be like, oh, hell yeah. I wish I wasn't autistic and I could be like this person. But you're also like, I think one of the things that I would push back on a little in both instances is that you are you, and what makes you is beautiful, and it's unique, and it's awesome, and it's individual. And like being me is no treat either, right? So it's like, and I'm not trying to turn this into a me thing, but human beings are assholes. We're pieces of shit.
Yeah.
You know, like you were saying before we went on the show, there are some trans people who are complete assholes. Turns out they're humans.
Yeah.
You know, right? So it's like I try to look at people as them being individuals, and as a humanist, that's all that really matters. Right? Like Republican, Democrat, gay, straight, black, white, trans or not, you're a human.
Yeah.
And you have intrinsic rights. So
part of that is the way you have explained it. I think some audience members might get confused because some of the things you said are ideologies, whereas some of them are not ideologies. Someone's skin color is not an ideology, right? Someone's politics is an ideology. What is an ideology? Let's explain that for some of the listeners. An ideology is something that can be learned or taught, right? An ideology is something that you get indoctrinated into. That's a word that's being thrown around a lot right now, indoctrination of our children. Well, that's called psychological projection by Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott and those likes. When you think about what they're really doing, right, they are indoctrinating because they have provided and have zero evidence to support their claims that they are pushing forward, right? And indoctrination is defined as convincing somebody of a certain belief that you don't have any supporting evidence to back your statements. Whereas education is always surrounded by empirical evidence, usually objective empirical evidence, to support whatever it is you're saying. So those two things, when we talk about the LGBTQ, and when we talk about these issues like Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott, two of the biggest schmucks in the country, when we think about what they're doing, they're trying to scare parents. For 24 years, listen to that number, for 24 years, we have been teaching diversity and inclusion in the classroom, starting in kindergarten. We never have taught children sex education. The reason they call it sex education, like Ron DeSantis does, is because he believes if you're trans or gay or whatever, that you're a pervert, that you're an ideology, that you're a fetish, and they sexualize the LGBTQ. Now, if someone sexualizes another human being right out of the gate, that makes them the pervert, right? When you turn somebody into their genitals, you're actually the pervert, not the person you're talking about, which brings us to the bathroom bill, right? 99.9% of every incident that's happened in the bathroom is a cisgender individual following a trans person in, and that cisgender person is looking up under the stall to see if they have a penis or not. That's creepy AF. People just want to go to the bathroom and be left alone. So the people that are actually sexually assaulting or creating sexual harassment against people are actually the people crying about it in the first place. It's very interesting. And until you get into my circles, where all we do is we study the legal literature, the court cases, the scientific literature, the biology behind all this, you start to realize this. So when you see people like Ron DeSantis or Greg Abbott, you're grasping for straws. Keep in mind, they are not doing this because they hate the LGBTQ. They're not that stupid. What they're doing is a bigger agenda that most people haven't caught on to, and we're starting to see it propagate because nobody is afraid to say it anymore. You just said evangelical political movement, because evangelical is not a religion, it's a political movement, right? Christianity, that is a religion, but evangelical is political, make no mistake about it. And what we have here in the United States, back in 2001, when those towers fell, what happened? We ended up with Islamophobia, and this is what it looks like, and people are going to get their heads chopped off, and let's scare the living hell out of everybody, and this is what's going to happen. Sharia law is going to come to the United States. We all have to prepare. Oh, my God. So it was terrible. But then, over the years, over the past 12 to 15 years specifically, the evangelical movement in the United States have been placing evangelical politicians in local, state, and federal positions, as we have now come to reality. And all of these laws have nothing to do with any of the stuff you think it does. It's all about a radical evangelical uprising in the United States of America, and this is what it looks like. Let's start with abortion, Roe v. Wade. Let's move along to start talking about gay people and trans people. And by the way, their Bible, it's a joke. There's not even one sentence in it that describes a trans person, except for one, which is the book of Genesis when we talk about Eve. I can prove that Eve was the first transsexual on earth. People would say blasphemy. But the reality is, in Hollywood, where I used to work, we call that a continuity issue, because the way the book of Genesis was written, word for word, which is what a Bible literalist is. We all know what a Bible literalist is, right? They take everything word for word. If you were to take the book of Genesis word for word, verbatim, and let's just take the one that all these evangelicals love, which is the King James Bible, right? That was written in 1611 by a gay man, right? King James had 3 male lovers. It's historically, you can go look it up. Fact check the hell out of it.
Three known. It is widely accepted that King James was a real get arounder.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he probably had multiple partners.
Yes, there's no question. But I can only go as far as the research I've done and others have done that have shown definitively that there were actually 3. We speculate more, but I don't like to work within the realm of speculation. I work within the realms of I want people to fact check every word I say on your podcast and every other podcast I ever do. I invite people to do it because I will not speak unless I know they can fact check me just to prove, whatever it is. And then if they have an issue with that, we can come to punches later on whatever that is. Right. But, when you break down the Bible, what is the biggest argument people use against me? The biggest argument is XX equals female, XY equals male. Well, thank God they went to 6th grade. Right. But biologists, and you can include myself because I've studied biology for well over 15 years. That's just the tip of the spear, right? XX and XY. If XX is a female, definitively, like timeout, binary, XX is female, then why is it there are numbers, large numbers of people with XX that are born with male genitalia? And they are raised as boys because they have male genitalia. Then when it comes time to fertility issues, they do some tests and say, you're actually female. Interesting. The converse can be said as well. There are boys born with female genitalia that are XY. And that's outside of the normal realm of intersex. Right? With the SRY gene and with XXY, there's 112 different variations of that. So just those things alone prove that sex is anything but binary. Now, is the vast majority of humanity binary? Yes, that is true. But in science, we don't work on the most, what is the most? We work on explicit examples of everything. If there's just one variation, that means that it's not all or nothing. There is no such thing as all or nothing. So 1.6% of the human population is born intersex. That is with ambiguous genitalia, both sets of reproductive organs, or varying degrees of each. 1.4% of the human population is born like myself, where the brain structures in the second trimester of pregnancy did not differentiate with the body. And there are 19 genetic markers that show why that was disallowed during that time period. And it made people incongruent. Nobody that's trans wants to be trans. I mean, who would want to go through a life where your basic part of your humanity is scrutinized each and every day? Nobody would want to do that. I certainly don't like it. But I am a spokesperson now. I'm on the national stage, and it's up to me to tell some truth about this, and not just tell my truth, but tell the scientific truth. Because when Greg Abbott created that disgusting law where people can be charged a felony, doctors can go to jail for up to 20 years to life for supporting trans affirmative care on children, families that have a trans child will be investigated by Child Protective Services and have their children taken away from them simply because the parent loves them and understands the science. The American Medical Association, the Pediatric Endocrine Society, and loads of other medical organizations went to court to fight these people and denounced Greg Abbott and his district attorney and all these people that provided, by the way, zero evidence of anything. And this goes right up through all of the different political issues happening right now, including sports. I'm happy to talk about any of these things because they are detrimental. 40% of trans children attempt suicide. That's 3 times higher than their cisgender counterparts. That should be alarming to many people. Why do they do it? There's mythology about that too. They must hate themselves. No. The reason suicide ideation happens in the first place is because you don't fit in and you're told you're subhuman by countless people. I went to school in the 1970s. And in the 1970s, there was no internet. I thought I was the only human being that was born like this. In kindergarten, a boy named George, who, thank you very much, George, if you ever listen to this, he actually apologized to me 20 years later. I lined up in the girls' line, right? So here's another thing about Ron DeSantis, right? We're not allowed to talk about gender identity, right? But what do we do in kindergarten? We say, all right, girls line up on the right, boys line up on the left, right? Well, you can't say that anymore because that's a definition of gender identity. Calling someone a boy or a girl, that's gender identity. That's how they didn't really think this through. So I lined up in the girls' line. George grabbed me in a bear hug, and he grabbed me and he cracked my back, and I was out of school for nearly a week.
Oof.
And they kept calling me a sissy and a little girl and this and that. And this continued every year of my grade school experience. And what's funny is when I asked my friends, do you remember this, this, and this? Oddly enough, they don't remember a lot of these things. Some friends that were really close friends were like, yeah, that was terrible. But the other friends sort of like dismissed it and forgot all about it because it wasn't important to them, you know, but it affected me. And when you start to pick on the most marginalized group on the planet, and sadly, because I think all minority and marginalized groups matter, right? Black Lives Matter, all of these things that we talk about. But the most marginalized on the planet right this minute are trans women, and especially trans women of color. And it's because there's so much flipping misinformation and mythology surrounding who we are. Some people think that we're cross-dressers. Some people think that we're drag queens. No, drag queens are gay men. Let's just figure this all out right now. Drag queens are gay men. Cross-dressers, they could be trans, but some cross-dressers we have to put into two categories. Fetish-oriented, which means you're getting sexual kicks off of wearing women's underwear, or a cross-dresser that is just simply trying to find yourself because society has forced you to marry somebody, and this is your only quiet time to become what you think is you. And it's the only way in society we know how to do that. Then you have somebody that's transgender, right? And I don't even like that term because I never was transgender, right? My gender was always female. From the time I was 3, by the time I could talk, I knew I was a girl. I had to pretend I was a boy for many years because of society. I was born Catholic, which is, Jesus Christ, that's a horrible sword to be fed in the first place. And then found out my family was very supportive of me because by the age of 4, I came out to my mom during prayers. She was a nurse. She had no idea what I was talking about. There was no nomenclature for this back then. The only word that existed back then were a couple of words: hermaphrodite, which didn't fit me, and transsexual, somebody that had changed their sex, you know, their genitals and whatnot. And I try to teach people all the time that, you know, this is not arbitrary. Nobody decides to do this, but here we are, right? And we're always having the same conversation over and over because nobody wants to change their position. So the way I want to look at it from now on is, if you want to win the hearts of somebody that's completely stuck in their ways, you sort of have to ask them a question. Why is it you feel that way? Don't defend me. Like, I don't want to defend myself anymore, right? Instead, I want to put it back on them. Why is it you feel that way? Give me concrete examples why you feel that way. Here's the science. Tell me why you don't believe the science. You know, there's a lot of, there's a lot to be said that in Facebook people fight, which is why I don't like to do it very much, because you can't change people's mind on a social platform. It just doesn't happen. You have to meet me, right? I'm sure before you met me, you knew very little of trans people, Jason, especially. I don't know about the other two, but you probably didn't know a whole lot about what it was to be trans, and you probably learned a great deal. Now, through that, what I tell people is, don't take my word for it. I want you to go out and do the research and actually look at it holistically and try to and try to understand what I've been saying, right?
I don't even know how to follow that up.
Well, I can follow it up unless the other guys have something for me.
Well, first of all, hi Haas.
Hello, Hoss.
Hi.
Your microphone is really low.
Hi.
No, it's not using it.
Is it my mic?
It's not using the your Stephen A. Smith.
Yeah, you're just not projecting. There you go.
Now
my mic don't sound nice. Is that what you?
Now it sounds fantastic because you projected. Before you sounded very soft.
I was trying to drop down to that TJ.
Don't go projecting on us, Haas.
You were very, very soft.
Oh, he was trying to get down here. I understand.
Yeah. You're trying to get down to TJ land.
Right.
So
You're going
down to the silk throat.
I would like you guys to ask me any question, and everything is on the table, and I mean everything.
So what I'm going to do, I got to go back and look at this, but we were having a conversation, and I have to apologize both to you, Amber, and to Winston, who because I have just been so busy for the last 3 weeks that I haven't had time to host that Twitter space. But Winston had asked a bunch of questions, and he's listening to the show, and we want to. I know he's on the right, and I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt to feel that he's trying to be genuine, but I do know that he had some things that he wanted to talk about. So I'll go back and find those tweets. But the thing that I fancy myself a critical thinker.
Yeah.
Now I'm not.
Yeah, listen to this guy.
Yeah, he's got some big words.
I fancy myself.
That's not that big of a word, fancy. Okay.
You sit on your smoking jacket with your Adirondack chair.
I'm sitting here with Nanny Fine and
classics.
Reading the Staffordshire Times and eating my gourmet grilled cheese.
Colorized classics.
Yeah, I'm having my gourmet grilled cheese from the food
he's
truck.
in his Malibu bathroom right now. Right.
Yes, but I try to listen because my opinions on this from 2-3 years ago and today are somewhat different. And but like when I go to church, and I don't want to pretend that the biblical evangelical and I'm with you, Amber, by the way, side topic here. Mm-hmm. If you really want to ban a book in Florida or Texas,
I already talked about
a book that talks about sex and violence and CRT and nudity and sleeping with your sister and killing kids, and I got a book you can probably look at for the list, and it starts with Genesis and it ends at Revelation.
And it's funny, Genesis actually has Genesis chapter 19 verses 34 through 36, which talk about Lot's daughters that got him incredibly drunk so they could have intercourse
and had sex with them so they could have and they got pregnant by him. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's and Lot's
and Hennessy they could do it every time.
And Lot was chosen by God saved Lot from Sodom and Gomorrah because he was so
Don't that sound like the most made up bullshit that your college homie told you ever? Man, they were just so drunk and so all over. I know you lying. I know you ain't nobody ever came to you once, and now all of a sudden you dot, and you.
Well,
why would you tell people?
Not only that, but there's a case in the Bible where I forget I think it's Tamar, where her husband dies, so her husband's brother has to sleep with her, and he decides. The Bible calls it spilling his seed on the ground instead of inside of her to have a baby. And God struck him dead. The worst book in the Bible.
No self-rape.
The worst book in the Bible to me. You ever want to have some real fun? Read Judges.
Oh yeah.
Judges is like he carries the wife does some crazy shit and he cuts her hand off on a door handle and then he carries her around, and she's dead, and the community rapes her.
The Bible by Quentin Tarantino, a
Yes.
Spike Lee joint.
It has the N word, every other word, and it's
For no reason,
like,
a black dude is getting demasculated.
Judges is the worst, but like this is the thing, like evangelicals, if I were to go to church, like, and I've heard this from the pulpit, and I say this way because it's like all of the incredibly deep and thoughtful and evidence-based things that you've said, Amber, make no difference because men have a penis and women have a vagina. And how can we not see something so obvious? All the rest is just woke garbage. That's all they're going to say. So it's like,
they can't say it anymore because the actual science.
They don't care about science. What makes you?
Well, they do, and here's my explanation to that.
Science is a liberal trick.
But here's my thing.
Scientist.
They cherry pick their science, right?
True, but science is, the vaccine's based on science. They don't like that either.
Liberals.
Yeah, it is silly. I mean, it is an upward battle, but quite honestly, there needs to be louder voices from this side. And,
Sure.
And because we are the majority, believe it or not, it just doesn't seem that way, but we are heavily the majority. And, it's just sad to see that people are parrots. They parrot what they hear instead of looking into something or meeting somebody that's different. Now, remember when we first started talking, Mikey, I said, some trans people are just unfucking bearable, right? There are people like that. There are people in the community that do a disservice to the fights that we are having. I am not a gatekeeper. Everybody is valid, okay, in my eyes, because the whole construct of gender and everything else that we have going on in society is bullshit anyway. Bunch of dudes came together and figured all this stuff out, and that's where we ended up. 18th century, we created the gender binary, even though that we had multiple genders throughout the ages for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. There were multiple genders from different cultures all around the world. We, as colonialists, dumbed it down to 2 genders, period, right? And they conflated gender with sex. And that doesn't even make sense because in science, we see people born with a penis and a vagina. We see people born with a prostate and a uterus. We see people born with all sets of all of this, and they say, well, that's just a mutation or an anomaly. No, in science, when you objectively see something, it exists. And when you do the math on the numbers across the globe, that's 1.8% of the population, 1.6 to 1.8% of the population. In the United States alone, that's almost 6 million people. 6 million people that are intersex. That's a lot of people. There's 4.5 million people like me. Now, some of the people that are like me don't even understand the things I'm saying. They don't even understand the science behind why they are the way they are. And then infiltrating, that's the only word I can use, are these fringe fetish-oriented people. Now, if they want to be fetish-oriented and fringe or whatever, God bless them. Well, I don't really mean it that way. Bless them, whatever. And be best, right? But
Zorkon,
don't go
bless
putting
you.
yourself inside the same container that I have to put myself in order to educate people on this. Because I have nothing to do with whatever it is you are. And you're saying you are me, but you are not that way. You were 40 years old and said, no, I just like wearing panties and doing some nasties inside of those. I think that's gross, right? Me, I happen to be asexual right now, right? I always was attracted to men, boys when I was little, and but I ended up marrying women in my life. Why? Because of a shitty society. Because when I was 17 years old, I was coming out to a friend and they said, you know what we should do with those fuckers? I said, what? We should pour gasoline on them and burn them alive. Now,
on
fast forward to
Roblox,
20
on Roblox, YouTube and Twitch, on Roblox, in the video game, not in real life ever. Terms of service.
Yeah.
Oh,
He's just protecting our stream.
CYA.
So I want to. Oh, and I told you I was going to go back and look for this, and I stopped. But let's, outside of the church-based thing where they believe that the Bible says things that it doesn't. Okay, like I think that most of us who are intelligent can agree, and this is coming from a guy who identifies as Christian, that the vast majority of people who call themselves Christians don't know shit about the Bible, right? Like I run circles around the guys at my Bible study. They don't know anything.
Yeah.
And it's truly sad. But and if there's anyone in the chat who has a genuine question, wants to ask it, I mean, certainly post it, because this can be a learning experience, right? But like I think that I'm struggling to try to find out what their big issue is, because to me it seems like it is that the left is trying to change what sex is, and that we are, and that somehow Hollywood and this show and anything from maybe Sam Harris and left of that, which is quite a bit because Sam Harris is more or less right, is trying to push a narrative that men can be men and women can be women. And like, if LeBron James decided tomorrow that he wants to play in the WNBA, that he would do that and dominate, and therefore, because of that idea, all of it is a joke. Like, it's being pushed on us. Like, they say, oh, well, they're having drag queens read to kids. And I'm like, yeah, and I agree. And I'm like, and I said this in my Bible study. I said, they were like, well, they said it was trans people, but in reality, the example was drag queens reading to children. I said, maybe the idea behind that is that when these little kids get exposed to people who may, be different from them, or do things that they might consider different from what their family would do later in life, that they treat those people like humans, and they realize that those people have souls, and they know how to read books, and that they like kids, and that they know how to love, and that they know how to show compassion and have empathy. And so that these kids can, therefore, when they become mature, can also have empathy and show respect towards people for being human in whatever capacity that they choose to be human. And they all got very silent when I said that, but I don't think it changed anyone's mind, because they're still like, well, but God says and Republican Party says, so X. And it's frustrating.
But what does God say?
About what?
That's what I would say to them is, well,
That's what they cherry pick.
I have been called an abomination to God by my own relatives, by other people, and they cite the Bible and religion as their go-to. And I say to them, where is that? Point it out to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't exist.
I want to say it's Genesis 2.
There is nothing in the Bible about
right.
No. I'm not saying there's anything about trans, because it's not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But what they do is they go to a verse and then they conflate other things. A perfect example of this is abortion. I'm not looking at a Bible right now, but I believe it's Psalm 119. I could be wrong. Maybe it's Psalm 29. I way far away from each other, but there's a 9 in there, where David is having a conversation. Yeah, 2 Corinthians, where they say, basically what David says is that you knew me in my womb. when I was in my mother's womb. And they will say, well, see, if God knew David in the womb, therefore he is pro-life. And that conversation in the Bible, if you look at the context of the entire verse,
what are you bringing context?
Yeah, you're right. Why even bother? You're right. I'm done. No, but the context of the entire verse is that David is angry or upset that someone is doing him wrong. He doesn't really name who, but someone is saying something negative about David.
Was it Man?
It was Meemaw and them was saying something negative up about David, and David be up and angry. So David's like, hey, you know what? Whatever these people are saying, God, you've known me. You've always known me. You know me since I was in my mother's womb.
Right. He was basically saying, you know me, man. I'm good for it.
Yeah. You know all them people on them streets.
Don't be listening to them. You know me. How far we go back?
We go back
to the mama's womb.
Right.
That was some pimp shit. That's what that was.
But they take it literally, and like, and let me, I want to say it's Genesis 2:4. Hold on here, Amber. All right, so hopefully I'm right here. So Genesis 2:4, these are the generations of the heaven and earth and why they were created in the day of the Lord. And again, this will be conflation. This is not about trans. But when I hope this is right, when no bush of the field was yet in the land and no small plant of the field had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not yet caused it to rain, there was no man to work on the ground. Let me move forward a little bit here because I'm obviously wrong. I'm in the right area here. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work and keep it. I'm in verse 15. And the Lord God commanded man, saying, you surely eat of every tree of the garden, except for this one over here, blah, blah, blah. Is it not good that the man should be alone? I will make a helper fit for him. Now out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens and brought them to the man that he would call them. And whatever the man called them, the man gave names to livestock, but there was not but there was not found a helper suitable for him. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man. And while he slept, he took one of the ribs, closed it up, and the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man, he made into a woman and brought her into the
Genesis 1:22. Correct.
Right. No, 2:22. And he said, this is the last of this at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, that they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked and not ashamed. So from that, they get all of that they ever need when it comes to gender science, or
except they don't. And here's why. And I was talking to
you're right. They don't. It's absurd to make that. To make that assumption is ridiculous.
Yeah, here's how we laugh about this. This is funny as hell. Only two possibilities can exist in this, because we already talked about XX and XY, right? Because Adam, he's still made of flesh and bone and chromosomes because he's a human, right? So Adam is XY. God grabbed a rib from Adam. Therefore, he grabbed the genetics of Adam and created woman. But the genetics of Adam only contain XY. Therefore, two possibilities exist. Eve was a man transformed into a woman, thus a transsexual. Or two, there's some miracle that the Bible leaves out, oddly enough, that Eve was a genetic female, but it would have required a second miracle for that to happen. Also,
that would have been Lilith. Lilith was the genetic female, because
Lilith was Adam's first wife that was left out of Genesis, because in the Jewish texts, it became bad for business to have Lilith in there, because she became the first succubus, right?
Also, Niles' wife on Frasier.
I was just talking about Frasier the other day.
I mean, think about that. Continuity issues. Hollywood, here we come, right? He grabs Adam's rib. Why? Why Adam's rib, right? And the reality is when you look at ribs, it's the opposite. When you think about, the rib cage on a woman and a rib cage on a man and everything else. Why a rib cage? And if you're going to go into chromosomes, because we're all human and we all understand these things now, XY is for the most part of why you're male. So what was it? What was Eve? And Eve didn't have a name. By the way, when God created Adam and Eve, he said, I shall call them Adam. I shall call them
Adam is
Adam then later.
Adam is I believe it's Greek or Hebrew for man.
Man.
I forget which.
That's right. That's right. So, I mean, I'm not here to piss on anyone's parade if they're religious, but I'm here to piss on their parade if they're going to shove it down my throat. Because at the same time they said, why are you shoving all your stuff down my throat? Well, I'm shoving all my stuff down your throat because prior to 1964 and 65, a black man couldn't walk into Woolworths and get a meal, let alone use a restroom or anything. And what did they do? They came back every single day, and more of them came in until we had that sit-in. And God bless that sit-in. Rosa Parks refusing to sit in the back of that bus, right? So many instances of where we need to advocate for people that are being discriminated against. This happens time and time again with different peoples, Jewish people, black people, Asian people, the indigenous Indians. Look at the American history. Look at these whack jobs saying that we're teaching critical race theory in young grades. Critical race theory is actually a postgraduate elective course that studies the intersection of race with political law, and on top of that, gender law.
It's Dr. Seuss.
Silly. So they know that they can
send my grade school children to college.
Yeah, they know that their base is dumb as a box of rocks. In fact, I believe
smart, damn it.
America is actually
Amber, I'm sorry.
It's all right. We're stuck in the movie Idiocracy, so I just figured why not go there,
He said
water the fields with Gatorade.
Mikey said I always send my grade school kids to college.
That's you do. That's where they're getting taught their shit.
Yeah.
Isn't that fucking?
Yeah.
I shouldn't
Right
have
after
never
thermodynamics, they go to race theory.
They
class.
got out of philosophy and then they went over to fucking CRT, and then they had recess.
Then they learn string theory and calculus,
and then they have a snack.
And then they have a snack.
And they had
nap time.
After the quantum.
Before quantum mechanics, they had to go to quantum mechanics first.
You gotta get that nap in, that good nap in.
And then they build a Ferrari from scratch. So I found what we were looking about. Now, again, this was back on 23 of March, right? So it was Troll Hell and Winston. So we sent out a tweet, we being I, saying, and this was back when the young lady who won the swimming title,
Leah Thomas.
Leah Thomas, thank you for correcting me on the name.
Leah Thomas
won a particular heat. I think it was the 400 meters, if I recall correctly. And I tweeted, I said, trans women have been owned by biological women in sports. They have had a worse record than the Cleveland Browns, LA Clippers, Seattle Mariners, and Toronto Maple Leafs put together. They finally win a swimming title, and Ron DeSantis wants to take it away. Now, the context here was that DeSantis declared the woman who finished second place as the winner, even though it was not there. That woman was from her state. So there was two people who replied to this, Winston and Trollhill, and they both were like, we want to talk about this. Amber graciously chimed in, but I was supposed to start a Twitter space and didn't. So here is your de facto Twitter space. I'll read two comments, and then I'll let you and then there's another comment in the chat I think is worth reading. Winston says, by allowing trans women to compete in women's sports, do you not think it takes away from the biological women? ? Shouldn't we work harder to protect the integrity of women's sports? Looking for a discussion so I can get a better understanding. Troll Hell jumped on that and says, in those rare wins, someone loses and doesn't get the recognition they deserve. Don't their feelings count? They get a loss on their record. As more trans compete, they'll start to win more. best to deal with it now and get a solution. I don't think either of those arguments hold a ton of water, but I think that I'm trusting that they're honest. Amber, go.
Okay, so Winston, if you're listening, the Troll Hill Brigade, if you're listening, when Ron DeSantis declared,
it's hard to take a guy serious when their name is Troll Hell, though. I
know. All right, so let's. I'll stop with the ad hominems. Whoever you are, if you disagree or whatever.
They called themselves that, so you're not being.
Let's discuss some facts here, and these are going to be things you've never heard of before, because you're sitting in your living room and having these opinionated discussions without the science. The Ncaa and the World Olympic Committee both have had committees filled with physicians. The World Olympic Committee back in 2003 had guidelines for trans women competing on the women's Olympic team. And it wasn't until the year 2021 when a trans female from New Zealand, I believe, made it to the Olympics. That means for 18 years, we have been trying to get on the women's Olympic team and we're unable to do so because we couldn't qualify. That's a problem, right? So when Ron DeSantis said, no, Leah Thomas is not the winner. In fact, it's Emma Wyant, I believe is her name, from the University of Virginia. That was really, really a pathetic thing for him to do. And here's why. They don't understand the science behind trans athletes. Trans athletes have never excelled in sports. They are not dominating by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, out of the thousands and thousands of trans athletes that have competed, less than one handful have ever made the news for winning. Leah Thomas is what we call an elite athlete. Michael Phelps, the swimmer, the most decorated Olympic swimmer, is an elite athlete. Do you know why he's an elite athlete? Because he has a genetic advantage that nobody else has. He has webbed feet, and he has a much taller torso than most human beings. He has genetic anomalies that make that happen. There was no bitch or concern about that, right?
His lungs are off the charts. He's like half fucking porpoise.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and here's the other thing,
but
yeah,
he's a man, so
right. Let's go to women. You're right. So now let's talk about women. Women in sports have had a lot of things they've had to deal with. Those athletes had to deal with for years and years and years, from pay, not being paid evenly, and the regulations being all screwed up, and nobody seemed to care about certain things until we started seeing trans athletes. And now let's break this down into some simple science. When we transition, a lot of us transition later in life because of society. We already know we are scared to death. Gay people are scared to death. In fact, up until recently, a lot of gay people were marrying women because they were too scared to be gay, right? It's fear that drives trans people and gay people to not come out of the closet and to pretend they're somebody else. That's the reality. That's the truth. Hard stop. Now, let's talk about the science behind what's really going on. Leah Thomas entered college and she started hormone replacement therapy. She was on it for 33 months before she started competing on the women's team. That's longer than the guidelines that the NCAA had put into place. Leah Thomas was, by the letter of the law and by the book, did not cheat. People were saying she was cheating. She didn't cheat. She followed the NCAA regulations to the letter, and then even a year further than that, because she competed on the men's team while she was undergoing testosterone suppression and estrogen therapy, right? For 3 years. So people say, well, why did she lose on the men's team? Well, she lost there, so she figured she wants to win. She's going to join the women's team.
A lot of people don't know that. I did not know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And that, thank you for that tidbit.
Yeah.
Because that might be why she was ranked 400 and whatever
Yeah, 414th because
Right. That might be why. Because guess what?
it's
She
not
was a-
might. That is why.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I thought that she had stopped competing on the men's team, gone through the therapy and everything, and then resumed on the women's team. I did not know she was competing as she was going through her therapy on the men's team. I didn't know that. And that is a critical bit of knowledge for people to understand.
Yeah. And here's the interesting part. Why is it men have an advantage over women in most sports? Now, there are some sports we can put some sports on the table and other sports off the table because it's a very nuanced thing. But let's just take certain sports for now and put them on the table. What is the main distinction between a man and a woman when it comes to that? I'll tell you right now. It's testosterone and it's muscle mass. And here's how we know this scientifically. Not only do the physicians and all the researchers agree with this, but when you look at it, men, biological men, have 13% higher hemoglobin and hematocrit levels. That's your red blood cells. In the Olympics, there's something that is illegal for you to do. It's called Epo Doping. Do you guys know what Epo Doping is?
Don't you get swap your blood?
Epo Doping is by getting epoetin injections, which makes your blood thick, which means you have a much higher hemoglobin and hematocrit level. How do I know all this? How do I know all this?
How is that? How does that help you though? How does that?
Because hemoglobin is responsible for carrying oxygen to the muscles to create muscle mass, to maintain muscle mass, and to repair muscle mass. It's also bringing oxygen to the blood, to the lungs, and supporting lung health, and more importantly, lung stamina. Okay, I know all this because I had polycythemia vera, which is a type of blood cancer, for 25 years, and when I transitioned, my hemoglobin went from sky high. If I was in the Olympics, they would have never permitted me to go because they would have thought I was Epo doping, right? So when I transitioned and got that testosterone out of my body, which further proves that it was toxic for me, my cancer disappeared within 6 months. So,
really?
Yes, and it's because your hemoglobin level drops down to a cisgender female's level. The hemoglobin in a man versus a woman, that's why when you get a CBC done, they mark it male or female on that, because there's a distinct difference in hemoglobin levels, what is considered high hemoglobin in a male and high hemoglobin in a female. Fact check me, everyone. And when you see that going on, what you see is somebody, let's just pick on Big Hoss right now.
Hell yeah.
He's built like a brick shit house to me, right? He's super cool, right? So let's take this guy and let's say to him, let's say that you are actually trans and that you overcompensated your whole life. And what do we do as trans? We join the military, some of us. We join the elite forces. We pump iron. We do everything to try to fit in as a man because we're playing a part in a movie. That's really what we're doing. We overcompensate and we just can't get it right. So let's say you finally said, I fucking had enough of this. I've been dealing with this since the day I was born. I can't do it anymore. So you start testosterone suppression with an anti-androgen, right? And over the next 6 months, your body's going to start changing drastically. Number one, with the injection of estradiol, which is a type of estrogen, those two things together are going to lower your testosterone levels to below female levels. Now, that's an important factor because female levels of testosterone can fall anywhere between 40 and 110, right? So 100 to 110 parts per million, right? For that. They call it deciliters. I'm getting the terminology wrong because I'm on the spot right now and it's like midnight. But you can look this up, right? So there's a certain female testosterone level that exists and a typical male testosterone that exists. A lot of males run in the range of 400 to 700, right? Which is really high. When you take what we'll call a biological male and you lower the testosterone level that much, and do it over time, which is a 2-year period, by the way, that they have to do this during transition, you end up with, let's call it a Ford E, what do they call these damn trucks? A Ford F-250 pickup truck with a big diesel engine in it, right? But the problem is you take the diesel engine out of it and you put a Ford Focus engine in it instead. So you have this big frame, you know, without the engine to support it anymore. That's why trans athletes have to triple up and quadruple up their exercise regimen, because they can't sustain the mass. Your muscles literally melt off your body, right? I have hardly any muscle mass left, right? So people need to understand that there's absolutely differences that happen. And then everybody says, well, the skeleton. Horse shit with the skeleton already. Number one, I have a higher degree of osteoporosis risk than a cisgender individual, right? So over time with estrogen, my bones become more and more brittle. That takes a long time, however. So for Olympic athletes, maybe that's not true. But your skeleton, by and large, is not the thing that is measured, or the metric that is measured by these physicians and researchers to say your athleticism is X, Y, or Z because of your fucking skeleton.
Yeah,
no,
because if you don't have the muscles, if you don't have the muscle strength to move the skeleton around at the same way,
yes,
the skeleton actually becomes an albatross.
Yes.
Yeah. So if they've got denser bones.
Yes.
Yeah, but they got less muscle to move those bones around. And we all know that if you can't move the muscle with the same force and speed.
And now let's take something else into consideration. So we've covered the whole blood thing and how blood, you know, is a critical factor. The red blood cells are a critical factor. Now let's go into the psychological factor. Leah Thomas was just simply trying to do the best she could, because she is a trans woman, and she always was. The people see her transitioning older, sort of like people saw me transition older, and they think we just made some sort of off the fly, you know, we're making a choice right now to do this because we want to win or something. That's the most idiotic thing I've ever heard. So when she's doing it, we put a picture up. I know this is sort of unethical, but so many of us put a picture of Katie Ledecky up. Do you know Katie Ledecky? She has the same height, same weight, same shoulder mass, same girth and width of her body as Leah Thomas. And what we would say is this: who? You mean to tell me that this person, you think this person is a man? Are you kidding me? And then what? By doing that, you're tricking them, and they say, "You're goddamn right, that's a man. Just look at those shoulders and look at this and look at this." And then we say, "By the way, genius, that's Katie Ledecky. She's a cisgender woman, and she is actually a faster swimmer than Leah Thomas." People only want to know what they want to know, right?
Well, yeah, but look. These are the same people who say Michelle Obama is a man. So I mean, it's like none of, and this is the part that's frustrating. There's a few honest ones who will listen to this conversation and they'll be like, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong on this. Maybe I need to do more research. Maybe I need to talk, because most people who are anti-trans are not really anti-trans. They just don't know what the fuck it is, and it's scary to them, right?
Yes.
But there is this big percentage of people who I'm not talking about in that last sentence who don't give a fuck what you say or how you say it. And those people, unfortunately, have the loudest voice, and they're the ones who are listened to, because 90% of people don't listen to these types of conversations. They're not interested. They see penis, vagina, end of story. And it's so, and I was in that group for 41 years.
Yeah. I mean, you watched Kindergarten Cop and your whole life changed, right?
Yeah. Boys have a penis and girls,
yeah.
But I tried to describe it, because the wife is like in that camp, and I was like,
it's not a tumor.
And I was trying to, it is a tumor.
It's not a tumor.
But like, I was trying to explain to her, I was like, well, and maybe I made a bad argument, but I'm like, imagine that like a zebra was a zebra because it had stripes, but also because it had hooves. And if you have a zebra that doesn't have stripes, is it still a zebra? Right? Like, if it was born all white or all black, you know, would it but its mom and dad were zebras, would it still be a zebra? And it's like, you're looking at only the stripes and saying it's a zebra because of the stripes, and not looking at the other 600 things that have to do with being a zebra, because this is the one that you pay attention to, and that's how you identify zebra. And she's like, if it does, and it was like most flippant. If it's not a zebra, it's not a zebra. God would have made it the way that God made it, the way that He made it. And I'm like, but God, and this is why I get frustrated, Amber, because it's like, there are so many people that I know and care about in my life who aren't interested in this conversation and should be, but they're just like, fuck it, penis, vagina.
It's because it's easy.
But why?
Humans will always go for easy, until they learn and decide to do like that extra step. They will always go for like the path of least resistance.
Look what happened with the athletes, right? With Leah Thomas and whatnot. Before that, those same people were saying there is no such thing as trans people, and now a lot of those people are actually saying, okay, there's trans people, but they don't belong in sports.
Right.
So it's a gradual thing over time that happens, and we're going to be long gone from this planet before that ever gets solved, because look where we are with gay marriage and everything. We're still having problems with that. We actually have a state, the state of Mississippi, that is actually trying to constitutionally challenge the Supreme Court so that they can disallow interracial marriage again.
Of course.
Did you hear that one? That's another one that's out there, and now there's 4 other states that are actually considering jumping on that bandwagon. So there's a whole lot of weird patterns going on in society over and over again throughout history, and we're in another one of those patterns. You know
what is so? I mean, I don't know where we're at in the show, but
it doesn't matter.
I'm guessing we're about an hour in. What would be like your? I don't want to say your closing argument, but maybe that's like what is the overarching theme of like what you would want someone who maybe they are the person who has that Bible says penis, Bible says vagina, I'm not going to bother to read it, but like what would your parting comment be to that person?
All right, there's 2 things that
outside of fuck you, because that's what you should give them.
I have one thing to add once Amber's done.
Okay.
Yeah.
The first thing I would do is I would ask them to read the Bible one more time, and let's talk about people that are intersex. There are a lot of intersex people that are also trans, because doctors made a decision for them when they were just born and asked the parents, do you want a boy or a girl, because they have both parts. And the parents would make the choice, and they would often make the wrong choice. So that person would become trans because they mutilated the anatomy at birth, which seems to be okay for these crazy people. So at first, what I would say is read the Bible and read what Jesus Christ says about people that are called eunuchs. He says some of them were born this way, and they shall inherit the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so people that are intersex is what he's talking about, eunuchs. There's 4 ways that you can be a eunuch according to the Bible. You were born that way, you were wounded in battle and lost it, or you self-mutilated, right? In either of those cases, Jesus himself says that they shall inherit the kingdom of heaven. Period. It says it word for word. Can I give you chapter and verse this minute at 12:30? No. But it is there, and you can look it up on Google and find the actual biblical verse. The second thing I would say is children from a very young age, from the age of 3, the ages of articulation, we all know our gender identity by the time we're very young. And for them to say that kindergarten through 3rd grade is age inappropriate.
Real quick, sorry,
Go ahead.
Matthew 19:12.
Thank you. That's the one, Matthew 19:12. So
I didn't know that off the top of my head. I had to look that one up. So
thank you for looking it up.
And I usually know this shit off the top of my head. So good job.
I do too. It's just so late. So the other thing is we have been teaching diversity and inclusion in grade school from kindergarten on for 24 years. And this is what it looks like. It doesn't look like anything that Ron DeSantis is trying to make parental stuff. I think if parents need to make decisions on what we're teaching in public school, those parents need to get a waiver and go to a different school or put their kid in parochial school. You know, they don't belong in public school because public school is for the greater good of society. But I would tell them, we've been teaching that some kids, some children have a mommy and a daddy. Some children have just a mommy. Some children just have a daddy. Some children are raised by somebody other than their parents. Some children have two daddies. Some children have two mommies. Some children have a parent that is trans. And some children are actually trans themselves. How do we know this? Because we know our gender identity by the age of 3. And people need to start understanding that scientific fact. And you all know it because each and every one of you, the 3 of you in front of me, can sit back, take a deep breath and say, is what Amber's saying true? Let me think about this. When did I know I was a boy? Was I 14? Was I 16? Was I 32 in mom's basement? No, of course not. That sounds ridiculous. You were about 3 years old when you understood you were a little boy. And everything was just fine for you guys because you were born congruent. But there exist people just like kids that are autistic, that can't show emotion properly, right? There's all sorts of things that happen in that spectrum, right? The same thing goes with gender and different sexual anomalies that happen before and during birth. So I would say, you know, let's have a real conversation about, you know, what this is really about. This is not about parents' right to choose. This is about creating a narrative to try to put some evangelical twist inside of our country. There's 34 states now that have signed on to this nonsense. There are, I believe, a dozen states now that are advocating for the Bible to be placed, the Christian Bible to be placed in the school again. There are, they put it under the guise of having prayer in school again, but that's not what they're after. There's just so many things that
they're after a theocracy.
Yeah, they want a theocracy.
They want Christian Sharia law. Simple.
Yes, and
some of them.
We're less than 8 months away to possibly seeing that happen if they get Congress. So, and Mikey, you had a question.
Mikey will probably be irritated, but I am gonna. So one of the in the chat. Well, no, I'm reading a question from the chat. So Flo asks,
I think Flo.
I think this is a fair question. In your opinion, Amber, what age is appropriate to encourage, support a person's trans? So like helping, I don't think he said it right, but helping someone to transition, like either be it by the school district or by the parent. What age is like the age that you think is right? Is it earlier the better, like some say, or others will say, like, you know, after 18 when they're an adult they can make that decision? Where do you stand on this, and any science that you have to back up what might be the best decision?
It's a good question because people don't understand this one either. Transition comes in many forms. When you're a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old, you're socially transitioning. Social transitioning means you can grow your hair out, which is a social construct, a gender construct. You can wear a skirt to school or dresses, or you could put, put your hair up in a bun, or you could play with the girls, or, you present as a girl because that's what you are. The parents are not doing this. The parents are probably taking the child to a psychologist, and the psychologist is following a set of standards that they have to follow to properly diagnose, is this really what's going on with this child? And if it is deemed so, they say to the parents, I hope that you guys can affirm your child, because we have found that affirming your child's gender identity will severely cut back suicide ideation a little bit later on. We've had kids as early as 7 years old commit suicide because of their parents not affirming them. So when you come to the other part, you're talking about chemical or hormonal. What we have is girls typically enter puberty a few years before boys, right? We have something called puberty blockers. They've been around since 1981. For most people, their brains are exploding right now because they think it's something new. They've been around since 1981, and they don't do anything but delay puberty. Now, what are some of the side effects? You can stop growing, right? You can stop gaining height. It can affect many things in your life. But the doctors, the physicians, the psychologists, there's literally a team of physicians working with you around the clock on these sorts of things so that you can make an informed decision on these types of medications to make sure this is what is going to be suitable for you to live a full congruent life. And that's what this is really about. This is not about someone else making a decision for someone else's life because they're not living that life. So as far as hormones go, puberty blockers are not hormones. Let me repeat that. Puberty blockers are not hormones. They delay the onset of puberty so that the parents, the child, and the physicians involved can make decisions that are appropriate for the child so that they can transition or go through the correct puberty in their sense. Or they can say, I don't really need to do that. I'm fine the way I am. Right? Nobody gets operations. There is no surgery for a child. Number one, they don't have enough mass. So if you were born and assigned a male at birth, you're not going to get surgery when you're young. You know why? You don't have enough donor tissue from your penis in order to form a 6-inch vagina. Okay? That's just the way it is. Now, that surgery, for those that don't know, I'm not afraid to say it. I have a vagina, right? And mine, you can line me up, in the police station fully naked, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a police lineup, and you wouldn't be able to tell my vagina from another woman's vagina. That's how good the surgery is.
No, wait a minute. Let me now I know it's not number 3.
This one's at a 32-degree angle. It must be.
But now here's the thing. Flo is also asking, I found numbers from 4 to 80% detransition percentage depending on the study. That's unbelievably wildly incorrect, and let me explain why. I don't want to prove poor Flo incorrect.
Talk your shit, Amber.
But what I'm going to do is correct you a little. The number of true transgender people that detransition is about 1 to 1.5%. Okay, here's why. Those numbers that you're reading are from people that are not actually trans. There's a lot of girls, and I call them girls on purpose because assigned female at birth, sexually assaulted by daddy, all sorts of other issues that happen, and they say, I'm really a trans man. And it turns out they're not. So they detransition and they write these pathetic books that go #1 on Amazon bestsellers list, but they are nothing but contrite stupidity. They have nothing to do with the trans experience whatsoever.
How do you really feel?
I mean, I'm just being honest. I read the book, and that was the book that beat me out for all those years. Right? That book, because the conservatives were like piling money into it. Yeah. So the reality is, when you read these books by these people, they are nothing but disgruntled TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists, and it's really sad. It's really sad. So what I would say to Flo is this: the percentages are very low, and for all trans individuals, and I can only speak for trans women, even though I know a lot about trans men, less than 1% of trans women detransition. And the reason for doing so is because their expectation of what society would treat them as didn't match from their mind to reality. Because what happens is, when we do transition, we are actually more ridiculed after we're transitioned, because when you go through the wrong puberty, there is massive permanent damage applied to the body.
Yeah.
From bone structure, facial hair, deepening of the voice, muscle mass, broader shoulders, everything. If we were able to stop that first puberty, you come out like all these other girls that are now very young and very happy, and you can't tell the difference. You would swear they were born cisgender female, because puberty is that one thing that changes the entire game. And it's the one thing back in the 1970s and 80s that I dreaded to have to go through. There was no internet back then. I lived in a town that had more deer than people, right? Think that through. There were more deer in my stupid town than people. And we didn't understand diversity. So I thought I was the only person like this. And when puberty started coming, I reclused to my bedroom. I was so terrified at what was happening. I would watch my girlfriends developing, and I wasn't developing. And I was going the opposite direction. I was getting hair everywhere, and my voice was getting deeper, and it was so horrible. So let me also answer one more question to Flo. She's asking a lot of questions, and I appreciate her questions. I think they're well thought out. So Flo, thank you. So the only trans who detransition are either TERFs or bullied into it. Got it. No, that's not true. Maybe I misspoke. I'll blame this on me. People that detransition were either never transgender in the first place. All right, let me say this. People that you're reading about that detransition were misdiagnosed, were not actually trans in the first place, or their expectation of how society would accept them was out of alignment with reality. Does that make sense? I hope so. Just go ahead and put something in the comments, sweetheart, if you understand what I said. Yeah, I see a few other questions.
That's an interesting way to put it. And the second one is entirely the most disheartening, because it's like you have a problem, any problem, and you want to deal with it, and you deal with it in the way that is best makes sense, and society still tells you go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the part that's the real tragedy. I know, Mikey, you got the last comment on this, and then we'll play 4 Down Territory with Amber and have a little fun.
Yeah, because I mean, I see some other comments here. What about Bulbasaur? I mean,
I don't even know what that is. What is that?
The thing is that there's certain people, this Staggerson Jags or whatever has a very limited idea of how biology works, right? So
Stags is a friend of ours. He's talking about something else. He's not referencing.
Oh, he's not being mean? Then
no,
I apologize.
No. He's not being mean.
All right, I apologize.
I promise.
I'm Bulbasaur, just so you know, Stags. Okay.
No, we were talking like.
What is that?
I'm trying to tell you.
So the thing came up about there being only 2 genders. So he's like, so it's like he had Skeletor and He-Man, and I was like, well, what about Charizard and Pikachu? And then he says, what about Bulbasaur? So that's
I'm Bulbasaur.
Yeah, so people don't. I actually don't have an emote for Bulbasaur.
All right, I apologize because I didn't know who he was, and I see these type of comments out of context sometimes.
Right.
I see people that are just hateful, and you're obviously not. So please
won't
accept my apologize.
People know.
Oh, I say we cancel. No, let's cancel them anyway.
No, people.
Jags, you're canceled. You're done.
Mikey, I am on edge. I want to hear your question. Go.
People know better than the disrespect around here. What I was going to say is, one thing to consider is with your question to Amber Dutch, is a lot of this is not Amber's job. A lot of this is our job.
Yeah.
Just like solving racism is not black people's fault.
Yeah.
Right.
Speak.
So when motherfuckers get to talking reckless, I identify as an attack helicopter. Shut their ass up. Shut them up. What are they gonna do? Fight you? They're gonna beat you up? No, they're gonna fucking. They need a hand slap.
That is
they need regular hand slaps from the people that they know and trust, so that they can understand where the boundary is, so that they're not running up to people who are in that affected group asking where the boundary is. Bitch, where the fuck is your friends? Where is your family? Where are the people you hang out with on a daily basis?
Where are your fingers for doing research?
Get
They
on the
always
fucking
want to ask.
internet.
They always want
make
to ask the
some
marginalized
friends. Yeah.
for the information.
Right.
But they're quick to go out and try to find as much information as they can that supports their backwards ideology.
Yeah, they'll quick to go on Google to disprove something that a person in the LGBTQ community says. They're quick to do that research, but they won't do any research to enhance their perception and the nuance and to get some sort of understanding of the idea. They won't do that. So that's your friend's job. That's all. If you have that friend who's a fucking dick and says and makes fucking trans joke, that's your job to shut them up. Not Amber's job. She shouldn't have to write a fucking book.
Yeah.
Okay. That's our fault as a society for not taking care of her. And and so when I have to deal with racist motherfuckers, that's y'all's fault for not taking care of them. We are a fucking community. And if you don't act like it and you don't act like we're all on the same fucking team, then this is the shit that keeps going back. So Amber, I don't want you to do another thing for that you don't feel like you want to do, not need to do, want to do again for the rest of your life, because I think everyone else should be motivated enough to get off your ass and stop being complacent when people being fucking turfs.
And you'll see
lazy.
Funny.
Just don't be lazy.
Like,
you'll
there's
see
no
this.
good reason to be a fucking turf.
Yeah.
You'll see this
Don't be
again
afraid.
when we talk about autism after the second half of the show.
Yeah.
It's going to be amazing to you how much of that what Mikey just said comes right back up.
Oh, and there's a lot of autistic trans people, by the way. There's
there's
an intersection there. And,
Huge.
And to Mikey's point, you're right. I mean, people that are marginalized and whatnot, we do have one problem. We have people like Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro and these people with really large voices that are shouting this stuff out. And here's the problem. If there's a truth that exists and somebody comes out and usurps the truth and says it over and over for a long enough period of time, the old truth disappears and the new truth becomes the new truth.
Let me say that how Ben would say it. So if there is a truth that does
God.
exist, there will be two truths that exist. And if you know that those truths exist, then you do know that those truths do exist. Indeed. So now we know that there are women and there are men. And those women and men are not men. And those men are not women. And those women are not men. But those men are not women. And those women are women and women and men and men. And God said this and this and that.
That's very good.
He needs to work on satisfying his wife is what he needs to work on.
No. My wife, that is
yeah.
disgusting. That is disgusting to make my wife wet.
Get down there and put in some hours, big boy. He got work to do before he get to talking about anybody else.
So Ben Shapiro and Madison Cawthorn can go into that.
And yes, people, there's a comment here that is so important. Okay. Can cis people call out TERFs too? Absolutely.
Fuck yeah.
100%, please. And what I tell them is after I tell them off, my words are, I'm very sorry about your foot. And what that means is I drop the mic on their foot, right? So, it's just one of those things that people need to understand that, it's just not acceptable to watch people dehumanize and make people subhuman. Remember, it wasn't too long ago, guys, and I'm specifically talking to Big Haas and Mikey. It wasn't too long ago when religion was used against you. They said, well, God said
never.
It's too sad. It's really a sad thing that we keep doing and repeating in society over and over again. Oh my God.
I'm getting tired of people talking about that. It's been weeks since it's been weeks. And
here's the thing is that's the argument I have with my black brothers and sisters when we talk about the LGBT community is they're using the same playbook to disenfranchise the LGBT community as they used to try to disenfranchise us, as they are still using to disenfranchise us.
Yep.
The demonization, calling and labeling people in the LGBT community as more prone to pedophilia and stuff. That's just criminalization, just like they do to black people. Oh, they're more prone to being criminal. They're going to rob you and steal from you and kill you. And the LGBT community, they're going to come after your kids and they're sex perverts and da 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 da. So
Yeah, that's mythology.
It's the same playbook, just a different chapter.
Yeah.
You know,
And
I argue and I argue and I argue and you know, the first thing I did was go into my chat with my group of friends and say, hey, I'm on with Amber. She's talking about the genetics and the science and everything behind trans and everything. You guys need to get on and get some of this information that you're not privy to, because I'm not able to allocate it as well as she is. You need to get on and listen. And I hope to God that some of my friends got on, because they need this information, because they're smart enough and mature enough for the most part to at least hear the information and possibly shift their stance a little bit with the advent of new information.
It's true.
And I've been saying, and the last probably like 5 or 6 panels I've been on, Black people, if you are not for Blacks and LGBTQ, you're a white supremacist, and we can talk about it.
Wow. Yeah.
At me.